Donald Trump is now officially the president of the United States again, and he immediately began his second term by vowing to expand the U.S. empire. At his inauguration, Trump promised to, quote, expand our territory, end quote, to expand the territory of the U.S. empire. He also vowed to forcibly take over the Panama Canal in violation of Panama's sovereignty. He fearmongered about China, falsely claiming that China supposedly controls the Panama Canal, which is not true. And he even invoked manifest destiny, which is a colonialist doctrine that was used by the U.S. colonialists in the 19th century to justify ethnically cleansing indigenous peoples and colonizing more and more land. Here's this clip from Trump's inauguration.
And above all, China is operating the Panama Canal, and we didn't give it to China. We gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back. The United States will once again consider itself a growing nation, one that increases our wealth, expands our territory, builds our cities, raises our expectations, and carries our flag into new and beautiful horizons. And we will pursue our manifest destiny into the stars.
This is blatant imperialism. Trump is not even hiding it. He's saying we're going to expand the U.S. empire. Now, of course, Democrats like Joe Biden and Obama, they also engaged in imperialism, carrying out wars on Libya and Syria and Yemen and Palestine. Of course, this is bipartisan, but the difference is that Trump is not even hiding it anymore. He's saying, yes, I'm an imperialist, I'm a colonialist, and I'm going to expand the territory of the U.S. empire. He's proud of it. Now, first of all, the Panama Canal is not for sale. This is part of Panama. The Panamanian sovereign government has said they're not going to give it up. It's not for sale. This narrative that China supposedly controls it is completely false, but it's part of this warmongering propaganda that Trump is going to use to try to justify escalating the new Cold War on China and to justify potential U.S. military intervention. Because Trump was asked by a journalist in a press conference if he would use military force and invade Panama and also Greenland in order to take over the Panama Canal and take over Greenland, which Trump wants to colonize and make part of the U.S. empire as well. And in the press conference, Trump refused to rule it out, indirectly threatening to invade and colonize Panama and Greenland.
Can you assure the world that as you try to get control of these areas, you are not going to use military or economic coercion?
No, I can't assure you on either of those two. But I can say this, we need them for economic security. The Panama Canal was built for our military. I'm not going to commit to that now. It might be that you'll have to do something. Look, the Panama Canal is vital to our country.
The Panama Canal is one of the most geostrategic trade routes on Earth, so it's obvious why Trump wants to control it. About 5% of global maritime trade passes through the canal, and Trump also wants to use it to restrict access to China, to prevent China from trading with the Western Hemisphere, especially with Latin America. And the U.S. under Trump is going to try to impose neocolonial control over Latin America, especially as Marco Rubio is going to be the head of the State Department. I'll talk about Marco Rubio a bit more in a few minutes here. But why does Trump want to colonize Greenland? Well, two main reasons. One of them was admitted openly by the U.S. government-funded propaganda outlet Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, which was created by the CIA as a U.S. government propaganda organ. They published an article letting the cat out of the bag titled, "As Russia and China Steep Up Arctic Presence, Greenland Grows in Importance for U.S." So they want to use Greenland as a base for power projection for the U.S. military in order to limit the influence of China and Russia in the Arctic, especially as climate change melts part of the Arctic. And Trump is a climate science denier. He's going to put the pedal to the metal in massively expanding fossil fuel use. He said, drill, baby, drill in his inauguration speech. So as climate change gets worse and worse and the Arctic opens up, the US wants to militarize the Arctic and prevent China and Russia from accessing the region, turning it into another part of the US imperial sphere of influence. So Trump wants to use Greenland as a big military base in order to isolate China and Russia in the new Cold War. So that's one key reason. The other main reason why Trump wants to colonize Greenland is because it has potentially trillions of dollars of strategic minerals, including rare earths that are very important for modern technologies. And the US is trying to restrict China's access to many of these minerals because China plays such a central role in the supply chain for critical minerals and especially rare earths. So Trump sees Greenland as a potential very profitable opportunity for the US to do that. Reuters published a list of some of the very important natural resources that Greenland has beneath the surface that could be very profitable for US corporations. They include rare earths, graphite, copper, nickel, zinc, gold, diamonds, iron ore, titanium, vanadium, tungsten, uranium. The list goes on. This is one of the other reasons why Trump really wants to get access to control Greenland, to colonize Greenland, to exploit these very profitable natural resources. Donald Trump is also threatening BRICS, the Global South-led organization that now represents a majority of the world population. A journalist asked Donald Trump about Spain, and for some reason, Trump claimed that Spain is part of BRICS. Spain is not part of BRICS. Listen to this very bizarre clip where Trump falsely claims that Spain is part of BRICS, and then he threatens BRICS, and he says that he's going to put 100% tariffs on BRICS countries, which again represent the majority of the world population, about 55% of the global population. And Trump is threatening to put 100% tariffs on BRICS countries to prevent them from trading with the United States.
What can we expect of the countries in NATO that spend the least amount of money, like Spain, France, below the 5%?
Spain is very low. And yet, are they a BRICS nation?
What?
They're a BRICS nation, Spain. You know what a BRICS nation is? You'll figure it out. But, and if the BRICS nations want to do that, that's okay, but we're going to put at least a 100% tariff on the business they do with the United States. You know what the BRICS is, right? You guys know.
Brazil,
You know what I'm saying, right? You know what I'm saying.
So
It's not even a threat. In fact, since I made that statement, Biden said, well, they have us over a barrel. I said, no, we have them over a barrel. And there's no way they're going to be able to do that.
This is an executive order relating to
tariffs, those countries, like Spain.
As a BRICS nation, yes. They'll have 100% tariff if they so much as even think about doing what they thought.
Can you explain how it's...
Which, and therefore they'll give it up immediately. So will China give it up.
Now, another country that Trump is threatening to potentially annex is Canada, and his supporters claim that this is just a joke, but Trump has repeatedly referred to Canada as the 51st state and vowed to make it part of the United States as part of his pledge to expand U.S. territory and the U.S. empire. Again, even if this is just a joke in scare quotes, the U.S. has a history of invading many countries around the world, of waging imperial wars. So rightfully, people in Canada are seeing this as a potential threat. And why would Trump be interested in this? Well, Canada has a larger landmass than the United States, again, especially with climate change getting worse and worse by people like Donald Trump massively expanding oil production. What we're going to see is much of the ice in the northern part of Canada melt. Some of this area is going to become habitable. And Canada also has trillions and trillions of dollars of natural resources, some of the largest oil reserves on Earth, and many other important natural resources that U.S. corporations can profit from. So once again, we see that Trump is threatening many countries with imperial expansionism. And especially for Latin America, Donald Trump's second term is going to be very dangerous because I already talked about how he's threatening to colonize the Panama Canal, and he's also threatening potential military intervention in Mexico. In his inauguration speech, Trump declared Mexican cartels to be so-called terrorist organizations, and he announced that he's sending U.S. troops to the southern border, preparing for potential military intervention of Mexico. The sovereign, elected, independent government of Mexico has repeatedly said that it would oppose a U.S. military intervention. Therefore, this would be an illegal invasion, an imperial invasion of the U.S. southern neighbor by the U.S. military. This is why foreign media outlets are referring to Trump's decisions as Trump going to war with Mexico. That's essentially what's happening here. Trump is also expanding the economic war and hybrid war on Cuba, which of course has been a target of U.S. aggression and meddling and coup attempts and a blockade for more than 60 years, ever since the people of Cuba overthrew a U.S.-backed right-wing dictator and created a revolutionary government in 1959. Well, Trump has put Cuba back on the list of so-called state sponsors of terror, which is completely nonsensical. Now, Biden was one of the worst presidents in modern history, a horrible president. He sponsored Israel's horrific war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza. He expanded the proxy war in Ukraine. There are many things to criticize Biden over. One of the very, very few good things that Biden did is at the end of his administration, with just 1 week to go, he removed Cuba from this ridiculous list. Cuba has nothing to do with terrorism, but this is a completely political list. And he did it just a week before leaving office. And immediately when Trump came back in on the 20th of January, just a few hours after coming back into office, he put Cuba back on this ridiculous list. It should be emphasized that the U.S. terror list is totally bogus, totally political. It has no legitimacy. As an example of this, the former leader of South Africa, who led the struggle against apartheid, Nelson Mandela, was put on the U.S. so-called terrorism list until 2008, well after he became the leader of South Africa, because this is a political list. And during the first Cold War, Nelson Mandela was closely affiliated with the Communist Party of South Africa. He was very close to the Soviet Union, and he supported armed struggle against the racist colonial apartheid regime in order to end the white supremacist apartheid regime. And because he refused to disavow armed struggle and refused to tell people to put down their arms in South Africa, he was put on the U.S. so-called terrorism list. By the way, Nelson Mandela was imprisoned by the apartheid regime for 27 years, and it was the U.S. that helped the apartheid regime in South Africa find and imprison Nelson Mandela. This was admitted by a former spy in the CIA, which played a key role in the imprisonment of Mandela. Of course, South Africa's apartheid regime was a close ally of the United States, strongly supported by the U.S., and because Nelson Mandela and many revolutionaries were sympathetic to the Soviet Union during the first Cold War, the U.S. had no problem killing them, putting them in prison, disappearing them, torturing them. And we see this history continuing today with countries like Cuba. Cuba had strongly supported the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, fighting against the racist, colonialist, white supremacist states in southern Africa. And the U.S. was on the opposite side, supporting the white supremacist colonialists. So once again, we see that Cuba is being punished by the U.S. empire for daring to challenge U.S. imperialism, for daring to challenge the global dictatorship of the U.S. empire, which wants to control every country on earth and wants to colonize foreign territory and control anything so U.S. corporations can profit and exploit all of the natural resources and labor of other countries around the world. And of course, we can also see this with Israel. Donald Trump has vowed to massively expand U.S. support for Israel. This is naturally bipartisan in the U.S. The Joe Biden administration gave billions of dollars of weapons to Israel as it was ruthlessly bombing Gaza and carrying out crimes against humanity. But for public relations reasons, for PR, the Biden administration temporarily suspended the export of certain weapons to Israel, like 2,000-pound bombs, which were being used to destroy entire neighborhoods and civilian areas in Gaza. So now that Trump is US president again, what is he doing? He's going to lift all restrictions on weapons exports to Israel, giving Israel these 2,000-pound bombs. And this is according to the Israeli ambassador. And Trump is also going to reverse sanctions that were put on Israeli settlers who have carried out violent attacks against indigenous Palestinians in the illegally occupied West Bank. So once again, complete carte blanche, complete green light to Israel and Israeli colonialists to massively expand their colonization and ethnic cleansing of Palestinian territory with US support 100%. And finally, this brings me to the extreme warmonger who's going to be running the State Department for Donald Trump's second administration, Marco Rubio. He was unanimously confirmed by the US Senate to become Secretary of State in a vote of 99-0. All sitting senators voted to appoint him as the Secretary of State running US foreign policy. Who is Marco Rubio? He is one of the most extreme neoconservatives, neocons, that has ever existed. He has strongly supported every single major US war. And back in 2020, Marco Rubio wanted the first Trump administration to invade Venezuela to overthrow the Venezuelan government. He is as extreme of a hawk as it gets. He is the textbook definition of a war hawk. During his Senate confirmation hearing, Rubio constantly fearmongered about China, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba, and Iran. He referred to China as the so-called biggest threat to the United States. He vowed strong support for NATO and called to expand military spending to prepare for a potential war with China and its allies. To try to justify US meddling in Latin America and threats against countries like Venezuela, Marco Rubio has constantly claimed that Iran and Hezbollah have influence in Venezuela. This is what he claimed during his Senate hearing. And once again, he's trying to set the stage to justify a potential US military intervention or invasion of Venezuela, which is what he wanted the first time. So Latin America is going to be one of the main targets of the new Trump administration, which is openly invoking the colonialist idea of manifest destiny. There are also multiple people on Trump's team who have been invoking the colonialist Monroe Doctrine, a 200-year-old colonial doctrine, which essentially claims that Latin America is the colonial backyard, in scare quotes, of the U.S. empire. So it's pretty clear what Donald Trump's foreign policy is going to look like. He's going to focus less on Europe and especially less on Ukraine, and instead he's going to focus the U.S. empire on expanding in the Western Hemisphere, colonizing the Panama Canal, colonizing Greenland, threatening a potential invasion of Mexico, threatening potentially even Canada, trying to overthrow the independent leftist governments in Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua, staunchly supporting Israel as it wages war against its neighbors in West Asia, trying to isolate and destroy the Iranian government, trying to suffocate the Iranian economy, and the end goal of these warmongers in the Trump administration is trying to destroy China. Really, that's their goal, to destroy the Chinese economy through economic war, through tech war, through trade war, trying to isolate China politically and diplomatically. They're not in any way so-called isolationists. People who claim that Trump is an isolationist are ignoring his policies and everything that he's doing, and the people he has appointed, like neocons such as Marco Rubio, or his neoconservative national security advisor, Mike Waltz. So it's going to be very important to follow what the Trump administration is doing around the world. And if you follow our work here at Geopolitical Economy Report, we will keep you up to date with the latest, most important information. I am Ben Norton, the editor-in-chief of Geopolitical Economy Report. Please like and subscribe. Please share this. I will be back soon. Thanks for joining me today.